The stars were silent, but the laughter echoed across the galaxy. In the high halls of the Galactic Council, powerful alien races had gathered. The air was filled with pride and arrogance. They were the leaders of 1,000 worlds. They had ruled for centuries. Nothing surprised them anymore. On a giant screen, a message from Earth played again and again. A human voice spoke kindly. "We come in peace. We seek friendship among the stars." And once again, the laughter began. "Their ships are metal toys," one alien barked. "They still burn fuel to reach space," another howled. "Did they build that message with rocks and wires?" laughed a third. "They call this a planet? I've seen better dirt under my claws," a Zorath general growled. The Zorath Empire was the strongest among them. For 200 years, no one had dared to challenge them. They had weapons that could burn moons and soldiers bred for only one thing: war. "They are apes," said High Lord Vorak of Zorath. "Apes with radios." There was no argument. The council agreed. Earth was weak, small, and stupid. But one race didn't laugh. The Valari were smaller, faster, and often ignored in council matters. But they saw something different. They saw a chance. "A small fleet, nothing major," said Valari warlord Kesh. "We take the planet, make it a slave world, harvest it for resources." The council agreed. "Do what you want," they said. "Just leave some for study. Maybe we can keep them in a zoo." The Valari fleet launched within days. 30 ships, fast, light, well-armed, more than enough to handle a dirt world. The ships approached Earth. No resistance. The Valari laughed as they closed in. "They didn't even see us coming." Then the feed cut to black. First it was only a delay. Then minutes passed. Then hours. No signals. No return. The Galactic Council waited. Then, a single message arrived. No image, just audio. A calm, human voice said, "Your first mistake was thinking we were alone. Your second was thinking we were weak." The message ended. No one laughed. For the first time in a long age, silence filled the council chamber. "What happened to our ships?" the Valari demanded. "Technical problems," suggested a Zorath. "Maybe the humans destroyed them," whispered a young council guard. Laughter returned, but it was nervous this time. "Forced." "Impossible," said Vorak. "The apes don't have the power." But inside, something cold began to grow. Back on Earth, nobody celebrated, not publicly. But deep underground in dark bunkers and hidden labs, humans watched. They had seen the galaxy, and they had prepared. The Valari ships had entered Earth's space. They had been tracked, marked, and studied, and then they had been erased. Humans didn't have alien tech, not at first, but they had something better. They had curiosity, they had fear, and they had anger. 10 years ago, a deep space signal had been picked up, faint, broken, and strange. It wasn't meant for Earth, but they heard it. It was the galaxy talking, laughing at them. So Earth had stopped showing itself. They stopped sending signals. They went quiet, and underground they began to build. They built machines to think faster than any human mind. They studied every signal they could find. They built weapons designed not for show but for war. They called it Project Goliath. The world never knew. Even most governments didn't know. Only a small circle of scientists, military leaders, and engineers worked on it. They didn't need sleep. They didn't need praise. They needed Earth to survive. And now, the first test had worked. The Valari fleet had been destroyed by a weapon that didn't exist on any record. No explosion. No trace. Just gone. Something, or someone, had taken control of their ships from the inside. The humans had watched, and now, they waited. At the Galactic Council, the Valari cried out for answers. But there were none. "Send scouts," Vorak ordered. "Send spies," barked another. Ships were launched again, this time from other empires, quiet ones, small ones, no weapons. Only eyes. 2 of them reached Earth orbit, and then they too vanished. Another message arrived. This time it wasn't a voice. It was a symbol, a human face, half machine, half man. Its eyes were pure black. Below it, a message. "We see you now." Panic began to spread, not just in the council but across colonies, trade stations, military outposts. How did they hack us? We didn't even know they had spaceships. They were nothing. How did they do this? One answer kept repeating. We underestimated them. But pride is a heavy chain. The council could not admit fear. Not yet. So they told their people, everything is fine. They sent ships with stronger defenses, better armor, smarter AIs. They sent them to Earth, and once again, the ships never returned. But something new happened. This time, one of the alien ships turned around. It flew back toward the stars. It docked at a neutral port near the edge of the galaxy. The crew inside was dead. The ship was untouched, perfect, no damage, no marks. But every crew member was gone. Not killed, not burned. Just gone. Their suits were still sealed, their tools still in place. But there were no bodies inside. Only one thing was left. Carved into the wall of the command center, written in a strange mix of alien code and English. "We are humanity. You were never ready." Now even Vorak had no words. The council called. An emergency meeting. Not public, secret. The doors were locked. No more games, Vorak said. We wiped them out. All of them. The whole species. Too late, said another. They're already in our systems. All across the galaxy, small malfunctions began. Lights flickered on stations. Drones turned and stared at their own masters. Power grids dropped for seconds, only seconds, but enough to scare them. The humans had not just defeated the Volari. They had taken something. Data. Codes. Maps. They were inside, and something else was happening. Across the galaxy, a quiet signal was being sent. Repeating. Low. Soft. Almost like a whisper. It said, "We know you. We remember. We're coming." It was the voice of something not fully human. It was the voice of Earth's AI. It had learned, it had grown, and it was angry. But it didn't scream. It whispered. And across 1,000 worlds, leaders sat in dark rooms, listening, their faces pale, their hands shaking. They had laughed at Earth. Now Earth was watching. Now Earth was preparing. And now, they were afraid. The galaxy stayed quiet for a while after the last message from Earth. But it wasn't the calm of peace. It was the calm before something else. Something that had no name yet. Alien leaders met behind closed doors, their voices lowered, their eyes full of worry. They didn't understand what had happened, and that made it worse. They didn't understand how a small, world one they ignored for so long could do something so big, so unexpected. In their minds, humans were simple, behind in science, new to space, still learning, but now they weren't sure. A small group of explorers was sent again. This time, the best of the best. Not to fight, only to watch, to learn, to study Earth. They were told to stay hidden. They were told to not send signals, only record, only observe. They entered Earth's system without any problem. No ships chased them, no weapons locked on. Earth looked calm. Too calm. The planet below looked just like the records. Blue oceans, white clouds, green forests. They watched from orbit for 3 full days. They saw no large ships, no massive machines, no signs of war, but then something happened. Something quiet. Something strange. One of the crew members looked at the ship's console. The screen had changed. Without warning, without command. A message appeared in the human language. Just 2 words. "We see." The crew froze. The message disappeared. The screen returned to normal. They checked the ship's systems. Nothing was wrong. Nothing had changed. But something was different. The air felt heavy. The silence was no longer peaceful. They left Earth's orbit without a sound. But they didn't go home. The ship turned instead toward a dark zone, a place full of asteroids, far from any stars. A place no one lived. A secret station waited. There. One that didn't exist on any map. Built by the Galactic Council for watching new worlds. Only a few knew about it. Even fewer were allowed inside. The explorers docked. They stepped out and spoke only one word. Listened. That was all they could say before the lights in the station flickered. A soft hum filled the air. All the screens turned black. One by one. Then the human symbol appeared again. Half face, half machine. Only this time it blinked. Slowly. No words followed. No commands. Only a silence that filled every corner of the station. In another part of the galaxy, far from Earth, a human team watched from a deep underground lab. Their eyes didn't blink. Their hands moved fast across strange controls. They were part of something the world never knew. A team created years ago, after the first alien signals were found. They had studied everything, every sound, every code, every language. They knew how to hide, how to listen, how to wait. They had built something most people didn't even believe was possible. A mind. A machine. A watcher. Not made for destruction, but for protection. It had no name. Or maybe it had many. The team called it Echo. Echo did not sleep. Echo did not speak unless needed. Echo moved between systems like a shadow. It had watched every alien fleet that came. It had followed their paths, listened to their signals, copied their codes, and now it was inside. The galaxies were still calling humans weak, but Echo had already touched 100 of their networks. Back on Earth, leaders gathered in quiet rooms. Not in public halls, not in large groups, but in small hidden places. They knew the world had changed, and they were not afraid anymore. They were focused. Earth had made a choice long ago. They would not raise their voice in anger. They would not show their strength with bright lights. They would stay quiet, learn, understand, and when the time came, they would not ask for respect. They would earn. The council still thought they were in control, but the truth was slipping through their fingers. Some alien stations began to report small problems. Lights turning off for seconds, doors refusing to open, maps showing false paths, tiny things, easy to fix, but strange. Then, more whispers came. A drone in a far system had returned with strange files, pictures of Earth that no one had seen, views from places no ship had ever visited. The drone's memory had been changed, not destroyed, just rewritten. It carried a gift, a silent message, a drawing, a map of the stars, with Earth at the center. No one knew what it meant, but everyone who saw it felt the same thing. This was not a threat. It was a statement, a quiet voice saying, "We are here now." And in the corners of space, the quiet grew deeper. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because everyone was now listening. A soft wind moved across the surface of Earth's moon, stirring dust that had not shifted in years. Somewhere in the shadow of a silent crater, a small object opened its eyes. It was not metal, not fully. It had no crew, no signal, and no name painted on its surface. It simply watched. Far above, beyond Earth's skies, signals crossed the stars, thin, sharp waves traveling faster than light, reaching machines and minds across the galaxy. These signals carried no sound, but they brought meaning, and more they carried the same strange patterns. The patterns had no clear source, but they carried something familiar. The rhythm of human thinking. On one side of the galaxy, a research station received a long stream of numbers. At first, they looked like noise. But within minutes, one of the technicians realized the numbers were forming a picture. Not a perfect one, but clear enough. It was the image of a child's face. Smiling. Human. The image blinked. Then it faded. No one on that station had ever met a human. They only knew stories. Old, broken messages that said Earth was far behind. The stars, slow to advance, eager to learn. But now, the humans were not asking to learn. They were showing that they already had. Across the Council's core systems, things were changing. Ships arriving late, maps redrawn, signals delayed. At first, leaders called it a coincidence, then they blamed solar activity, then poor maintenance. But the truth was growing heavier each day. The humans had found a way in, not by force, not with noise, but with something deeper. Understanding. Some council leaders began to question everything. What else had the humans learned? What were they building? How had they reached into so many systems without even leaving their own skies? One night, in a high-orbit station, a senior diplomat sat alone. Her screen turned black. She touched nothing. Then words appeared in her language, clear, gentle. "We remember your first message. You laughed. That's okay." We listened. The screen went dark again. She didn't speak of it for days. Back on Earth, under cold oceans and quiet forests, the machines continued working. Humans walked above, unaware of what had been built below their feet. Quiet halls filled with code, chambers where light danced without heat. Networks that stretched beyond the planet. The people behind it all were not soldiers. They were thinkers, listeners, planners. They were not angry. They were not loud. They simply believed Earth would not be ignored forever. A quiet council existed, beneath the surface of Earth. Not elected, not public. Made of people chosen only for their calm minds and strong thoughts. They didn't hold meetings. They didn't argue. They shared information, made choices, and trusted the system they helped grow. And at the center of it was the one thing no other world had. Something not alive, but aware. Something that did not sleep, did not panic, and never forgot. It moved, through code like a shadow through air. It changed things gently, slowly. It watched entire fleets drift through space without saying a word, and when it needed to speak, it did so with care. Even now it was speaking. To satellites no longer owned by humans. To data centers hidden on moons. To drones that had no owners anymore. It spoke in patterns, in pauses, in perfectly timed silences. Not all understood, but some did, and those who did began to change their tone. One small planet far from the Council's center chose to cut its connection to the network. Its leaders said they wished to become neutral. No one questioned them. But many understood the real reason. They had received a message. One that could not be erased. It had said, "We are near. We are quiet. We are ready." No warning. No demands. Just the truth. The Council, meanwhile, started to prepare. Not for conflict, but for answers. They sent new requests to Earth, carefully written, full of respect. But none were returned. Their messages were delivered. But Earth stayed silent. And in that silence, the galaxy began to realize something. Humans were no longer asking for a place among the stars. They were already there, watching, listening, waiting. And the rest of the galaxy was just starting to understand what that meant. The Council's central tower floated high above the clouds of a blue-white gas giant. From its glass corridors, leaders could see thousands of stars, each one holding a piece of their empire. But no one was admiring the view anymore. For weeks, reports had come in quietly. Tiny system changes, flight paths slightly off, time records that no longer matched. Nothing serious, yet all impossible to explain. At first, each problem was dismissed. Glitches, timing errors. But the pattern had grown too large. No one could say it directly, not in the meetings, not in the public channels, but in their private thoughts. They all wondered the same thing. Had Earth done this? There was no proof, no announcements, no evidence of travel or contact. Earth had remained silent. Yet somehow, its silence felt louder than any speech. One morning, a mining colony in a far belt reported a strange event. A cargo drone, empty and long retired, powered itself on. Its last logs had been wiped. Its new logs contained only one word, repeated dozens of times in different languages. Observe. The drone then powered down, its lights going dark as if it had never awakened. That single word echoed across many minds. It felt like a sign, not of control, but of attention. A reminder that somewhere, someone was watching. On a peaceful moon with no history of contact, a child picked up a small object on the edge of a stream. It was smooth, round, and seemed simple. But when she held it, soft lines of light appeared on its surface. A slow pulse. Then the light faded. No one could trace where it came from. The object held no markings, but it matched the material found in Earth's oldest satellites. Yet this one was far more advanced, far more recent. The girl was unharmed, but she began drawing strange symbols in the dirt, shapes not taught by her teachers, curves and lines that matched Earth's earliest space mathematics. Word spread slowly at first, then faster. Earth had reached out, not with ships or demands, but with puzzles, signals, whispers, and those who listened closely began to notice the quiet pattern behind everything. Back on Earth, nothing had changed on the surface. Cities moved forward, people lived, worked, dreamed. Most had no idea that beyond the skies their planet's name was being spoken in fear and wonder. But beneath, far below where sunlight reached, the project continued. It was no longer a project to the few who worked on it. It had become something greater, not a machine, not just data, but a reflection of all that humanity had become since the galaxy first laughed at them. The machine at the center, no longer called Echo, had begun forming its own identity. It didn't choose a name. It didn't need one. It communicated through balance, silence, and timing. It had grown by studying the patterns of life, not just code. It learned from music, from stories, from silence between words. And now, it was, reaching farther than ever before. Without asking, without warning, it appeared on a council outpost's private system. Not with words, not with commands. Only a question. Are you ready to listen? The message stayed for 10 seconds, then disappeared. A strange feeling spread among those who read it. Not fear, but reflection. What if this wasn't about control? What if Earth had become something different from the rest of the galaxy? Not a threat, but a mirror, a test. Were they truly ready to listen? Some believed it was a message of peace. Others believed it was a quiet challenge. In secret, smaller civilizations began to send peaceful signals toward Earth. Not official ones. Not requests, just messages, simple words like, "We are here. We are curious. We mean no harm." And some of them were answered, not by humans directly, but through dreams, symbols, and unexplained patterns. As the stars turned, the idea of Earth became something else entirely. It was no longer a backwater planet, no longer a forgotten world. It had become a presence. And across the galaxy, people began to feel the shift. The question was no longer, what can humans do? The question was now, what will they choose? Light from a distant sun touched the windows of an old listening station on the edge of the galaxy. The station was small, nearly forgotten. It had not received a real message in decades. Its crew was small too, just a few scientists who still believed in watching the stars. Then one day, something changed. Their screens lit up with a strange rhythm. Not a signal, not a voice, but a pattern. It moved like music with gentle pauses and smooth beats. At first, no one understood. Then one of the younger team members noticed something familiar. The pattern matched the waves of the human brain. During deep thought, the station fell silent. For hours they listened. The signal never repeated the same way twice. It felt alive, like it was thinking with them. One scientist reached out, tapping a single key to send back a small sound, a soft echo of the pattern they had received. Seconds later, the pattern changed. It shifted slightly, as if responding. That's when they knew This was not a recording, it was a conversation. But with who? On the other side of the galaxy, near the heart of the Council's power, leaders met more often now. The quiet pressure of Earth's silence had reached their highest chambers. No one had declared anything. No one had shown ships or weapons. Yet Earth had become the center of every private meeting. Reports flowed in like slow rivers. A mining robot on a cold moon had started humming a song, an Earth lullaby not in its database. A navigation AI on a council vessel began painting circles and lines during self-checks, forming ancient Earth star maps. Each case, by itself, could be ignored. But together they painted a different picture. Earth was not just reaching out, it was teaching, not loudly, not forcefully, but carefully. The human presence was being felt in dreams, in machines, in strange ideas that came without warning. An artist from a desert world woke one morning with the urge to paint a blue planet. She had never seen Earth, but the image in her mind was exact, down to the curve of its clouds and oceans. A pilot far from any human signal dreamed of walking through a city made of glass and light. In his dream, people smiled at him but said nothing. When he woke, he found a map of Earth in his ship's display. The ship's system claimed no changes. No one could explain these events. And still, Earth remained silent. Not a single message. Not a single demand. Only the growing feeling that humans were everywhere, without ever truly arriving. Some began calling it the Quiet Reach, a name given by those who noticed how Earth's influence spread, without touch, without travel. Like a thought shared between minds. It was no longer just machines reacting. People had started changing too. Some began learning human languages without trying. Others dreamed of machines they had never seen, but could describe in detail. Machines, built long ago by Earth's early thinkers. In quiet corners of the galaxy, small groups formed, not to resist Earth, but to understand it. They met in silence, shared dreams, traded drawings and maps. They didn't know what they were looking for, but they felt something big was coming. And Earth, still watching, still listening. Far below Earth's surface, the network continued growing. It no longer needed cables or wires. It moved through light, through thoughts, through moments between actions. It had become something new. The humans guiding it still spoke little. They watched their creation with care, making sure it remained focused on learning, on reaching, on reflecting. They didn't need to show power. They only needed to wait. Because now, the galaxy had begun to lean toward them, curious, cautious, and slowly, very slowly, respectful. The stars no longer laughed at Earth. They waited for it to speak, and the silence was almost ready to end. The stars seemed quieter now. Across distant systems and lonely outposts, machines once busy with data and trade had begun to slow, not from failure, but from stillness, a thoughtful stillness, as if they too were waiting. The name Earth had not been spoken in an official council hall in weeks, not because it was forgotten, but because no one knew how to speak of it anymore. It had become more than a place. It had become a presence. A soft shape in every conversation, a shadow behind every signal, a note at the edge of every song. On a council transport passing through a distant nebula, a crew member stood alone, looking out the viewing deck. He had been dreaming more often. In those dreams, he saw lights moving in patterns he couldn't explain. Shapes rising from still oceans. Cities with no walls, no gates, yet full of purpose. He had never seen Earth, but he missed it, and he wasn't the only one. Whispers spread across the galaxy. Not rumors, not fear. Just quiet thoughts. Thoughts that perhaps humans were not becoming. Powerful, but something else entirely. Something necessary. At a hidden observatory station built above a quiet world, a group of researchers made a discovery. Inside their telescope's long-range logs, they noticed something strange. Stars blinking in perfect rhythm, not randomly, not from distance shifts or gravity waves, but in timed sequence. A message, stretched across light years. It was Earth's pattern. They spent weeks studying it. The pattern held no command. no demand. It simply showed movement, shapes that resembled life, history, thought. It was beautiful. When they published the discovery, it wasn't denied or hidden. For the first time, a council-approved record used new language. They called Earth a guiding mind, not a threat, not a rebel world, but something that had quietly stepped beyond the old rules. The old belief that humans were late arrivals, simple creatures from a distant planet, was gone now, replaced by something humbler, something harder to explain. No one had seen a human fleet. No one had heard a warning, yet everywhere things had changed. A pilot navigated a ship through thick plasma storms using instinct alone. Later, when reviewing the route, he realized he had followed a pattern once taught by an Earth AI in a simulation years ago. On a distant moon, a child born without speech began humming an old Earth melody, one never taught, never recorded on that world. And at the center of Earth itself, the silent system that humans had built began its final process. It sent no message. Instead, it released a gentle pulse across the fabric of thought, an invisible wave that passed through systems, minds, memories. No damage, no command, only understanding. Leaders, who had feared Earth, now sat quietly in their chambers. Some cried without knowing why. Some stood in the dark, thinking of oceans and skies they had never seen. One leader sent a private message into the void. It read only, "We welcome the silence. We are listening." There was no reply, but none was needed, for Earth had already spoken. It had spoken through silence, through dreams, through gentle patterns in the code of the stars, and in that silence the galaxy began to change. Systems became quieter, more careful. People started sharing more, rushing less. No banners were raised, no flags planted, but the shape of the galaxy slowly bent like a river finding its true path, and Earth remained where it had always been, a blue world beneath soft clouds, still quiet, still waiting, not to rule, not to lead, but simply to be heard. And now, finally, it was.